Welcome to This Just In, the show bringing you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. And now, for the fastest voice in healthcare, here's your host, Justin Barnes.
Thank you for tuning in and welcome to This Just In. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. In these episodes, I'll bring you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and leadership. As always, we're broadcasting from the This Just In studios on the Business Radio X network, the Healthcare Now radio network, and our newest broadcast partner, the Health Podcast Network. For today, my 355th episode, we have a very special show. It's not only special for its content, but I'm also inviting a very good friend onto the broadcast. But before we get there, I spent many months now focusing the show and most of my conversations on AI. And I feel compelled to host this episode to articulate a simple framework that anyone can follow to engage AI in their daily routine. I'm primarily going to focus on business use cases, but these principles that I'll share certainly transcend to our personal lives and all aspects of optimizing AI. So for this show, AI, a foundation for everyone. However, before we dive in too far, I want to welcome my good friend, Jake Reid, to the show. Jake has been on my team now for 3 years and has been a significant component in how I've learned and built my world around AI, and certainly in incorporating AI in almost everything that I do, from my personal development to the radio show, and certainly now as a trusted colleague in my growth performance company. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thanks, Justin. You know, I'm usually behind the scenes helping run the show, but it's fun to experience what it's like on the other side of the mic.
Absolutely. And as we're talking off air and prepping for the show, I want you part of the show more often. I said at least probably quarterly will be good, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, you do a great job behind the scenes, but you also work with me a lot on these topics, on the research, bringing these documents and presentations and talking points together. And this is best, better than anybody else, or certain as well as most of us out here. So I'm grateful to have you. Glad you're here today. And let's just have a really good conversation. Again, this show for my audience came together really quickly because Jake and I have been working on an AI playbook in the background, but I think it's something that it was time to bring forward. We use it a lot, again, to prepare for my radio shows and make sure that we have the most relevant content to the topic. But I think it's time to really publicize this, begin talking about it more openly. And we deploy AI not only to stay ahead of where innovation is going and how it's being used in our society and communities, but also to ensure our business partners at Growth Performance, deploy the very best and most optimized AI strategies from the start. And certainly, from a radio show, this topic AI has been a topic for the last 6 months fairly heavily. Obviously, we've been talking about it for the last couple of years, but I think there's not a episode that goes by that we don't bring up AI. And it's not AI just to bring up the term. We're coming across real tangible best practices, real tangible use cases, how people are deploying it out in the real world, whether it's, for the most part, it's always in healthcare. However, we're deploying AI internally to our own business operations. We work primarily in healthcare, but our operations, are all go to market for the most part. And so we use AI deployed across all those different mechanisms. And to be most optimized in everything that we do, we deploy AI and very intelligent AI. And I'm going to dive into that because that's kind of one of the tenets that came together for this show and the reason why we wanted to have it sooner rather than later, because we find ourselves telling our peers, partners, clients on how to set up the right AI from the beginning. I think it's really important that I like to say, well, you may have some AI created and so maybe some small language models and large language models created. It's never too late to align or realign your AI strategy. This is not a short-term trend or a fad. AI will transform every aspect of our business and personal lives. And I know you hear that a lot, but the more I dive into it, the more I realize and I see it. So obviously, let me give you a hot take from you, Jake, before we, dive in here.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, it's been great working alongside you on this AI playbook, and it's been an exciting project. It's also been a very educational project. As new use cases come up daily for this technology, you just need to stay on your toes to learn how to implement them for what you need. And as you had mentioned, it's, never too late to refine your approach to AI, especially as it's constantly evolving, whether that be integrating the usage of an LLM or just further workflow automation. Just find the best use case for your scenario and go from there.
Yeah, great point. And I'm gonna dive into that. And we're gonna dive into that here in the next 22 minutes or so as we broadcast this show. But I've even been so inspired over the last really month and a half. I think we had John Halamka and Paul Cerrato back to back in 3 different episodes. And you can't help but be tremendously inspired with John and Paul. And so from that, I actually decided to go back to school myself. So I actually started school, Stanford's Graduate School of Business with a concentration in digital transformation and AI next month. So I look forward to bringing some of those tenants here. We're actually going to create a playbook during that class as part of the course materials. So not the playbook that we're creating from our company, but a different playbook specifically on digital transformation and AI. That's one of the outputs from this business course. So I'm very excited. I actually used to live in Palo Alto initially when we were forming a company back in the 2000s. And it's going to be exciting to get back into Palo Alto at times. So looking very, very forward to that. But I think before we dive into some of the tenets, and again, we're going to create a 10 principle framework for everyone, starting with this show. We're going to walk through those pieces here in the next 20 minutes or so. But understanding, and then actually we'll create an ebook from this. I'm sure we'll create some blog and thought leadership posts. But it's really important to kind of from day one to set the mission. What is your goal? In mine specifically has been for the last 25 years, 30 years now, 31 years or so, is really create a more sustainable healthcare system. And Jake and I actually were talking off air a little bit about this. It's not really that we're ever going to spend less in healthcare, but we actually can, in my heart, I believe we can get a lot more for our money in healthcare. We can become a lot more optimized in what we do and how we deliver medicine, much more efficient in what we do. In the early days, 20 years ago, really worked a lot with Congress on the sustained growth rate and the administration as well, but specifically MedPAC and Congress, because every year, people may not know this, but there are physician cuts always in the budget. And so we're always working just to make sure those cuts would not go into place and look for offsets, either financial offsets or creating financial incentive models that would allow physicians to not only stave off the SGR cut, they call it the SGR cut, a sustained growth rate cut, part of the Medicare formula, but also get incentives, maybe a 3% or 5% increase in reimbursement if they move down some quality tracks or other types of tracks with financial incentives behind them. So something that has been near and dear to my heart for now well over 20 years. But that's really, the precipice of how I got involved deeply in this, not only in the tech side, but then also what do you bring directly to these providers? What do you bring directly to these health systems in our communities to enable them? Not only with technology, but healthcare ecosystems that are sustainable, that every family and individual can participate in. That's really deeply rooted in what I do, my guiding work, again, all my policy work, even how the show was founded. It's been a great journey. And now with the advent of chronic care management and value-based care, it's going to continue on. So it's great to see those pieces. And without getting too deep too fast, how AI is being deployed in those markets and how AI is actually helping those specific tenants is significant. And here's my promise to you for taking the time to listen to this show and be a part of my different engagements is we will create this 10 principle playbook over the next couple of weeks. We'll begin to publish this out in multiple ways. And certainly, getting into 2026, you're going to see a lot more of this. I'm probably going to be dedicating at least half of my shows to AI best practices. A lot of them will be tailored towards healthcare, but also a lot of this, as you're going to hear, is transcends well past healthcare and applicable to your daily lives. I've even found it in a lot of my personal relationships. So it's kind of cool how, again, once you understand AI and how it can benefit you and how to really integrate it into your life cycle and your lifestyle, it can make a transformative change to you. And no pun there, because that is the name of John's new book and Paul's new book, Transform. But it is very transformative. So I'll stop there, Jake, before I continue on. Anything you want to add to that? I know that it's kind of cool because John and Paul almost as well as I do, just because you've been behind the scenes listening to all of those different shows and helping us put those segments together. But any thoughts that you have there?
Absolutely. No, I think really they've touched on it, especially in the first part of the show that they did about a couple of weeks ago. Just the efficiency that you can get from AI and not so much, the replacement or the fear that is kind of going around.
It's actually that's actually a great point. And another good friend of mine in the industry, Jared Quaiser, with Louisiana Impact Fund, that group, private equity group. Jared brings up how, and he's got some great pieces that he's going to be publishing on in the coming months a book and so forth that he's writing, but it really talks about the time that you're going to save with using and deploying AI personally, professionally. Use that to really scale yourself, become more efficient. Don't just take the time off, but actually become an enabler of bigger things for yourself personally and professionally. So take the extra time that you're going to save and how you're being efficient, and don't just squander that away unless you need to. I mean, some of us need to take more time off. But for a lot of us who are achievers and overachievers, maybe we can achieve more in that 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour day. So, and think, how can, again, this doesn't have to always be in business. This can also be in our personal lives. How can we be better partners, spouses, husbands, wives, all that good stuff. So something really important to think about how AI can benefit you, not just only in the business sector with your teams, but also you personalizing. So brings it to my first principle, and our first principle. See AI as an amplifier, not a substitute. So again, I'm going to bring a lot of these references and examples will come back into healthcare, but this again transcends to personal lives, and no matter what sector you're in. But if you have a good workflow that you've already figured out, then AI would absolutely amplify that. But if you have a broken workflow or something that's not working, AI is not going to make it better. It's actually going to make it worse, and make it worse faster. So this is where good leadership and strong leadership comes in, and best practices and fundamentals. That's why AI is not going to replace everything. And there's no, again, what Jake said there, and certainly what Paul and John have brought up numerous times on the show before, is we still need humans. We still need to be in the middle of a lot of this, but see AI as an extension of what you do, as an amplifier of what you do, but an amplifier being, you need to make sure that you are deploying best practices. It's not a substitute for work. It's an amplifier for the work and the best practices that you've already created. So make sure you have those down pat. It'll absolutely, again, make workflows better or much worse. What are your thoughts there, Jake? I know you've worked a lot on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see AI as, the replacement to friction, inefficiency, and especially burnout, staff burnout. And something that we say, especially within the healthcare sector, is AI isn't replacing clinicians, it's replacing frictions.
Yeah, actually, great point. So, and not to jump ahead too far, because we'll bring up Chai and other organizations in a little bit, but people have run out there and rushed to implement chatbots without putting the workflow or the right requirements or guardrails around it. And so you've either had little value, or worse, you've had chatbots out there giving medical advice or medical information. And again, there's a balancing act there. You can certainly share information, but you make sure it's medically relevant, customized to the patient. And again, we're working on putting some guardrails there, and I'll touch on that here in a little bit. But very important to pay attention to that. Again, what Jake said is make sure that you're focused on solving for inefficiencies, solving for burnout, which is significant in the clinical setting, and reducing the friction, because an AI can absolutely do that. The second principle is making room for AI. Leaders must create capacity for AI investments. So this is one of our clients and dear friends, AMD. They spend a lot of time with their customers, and certainly the larger ones, making sure, how can we do more with less? How can we innovate faster with maybe less of a footprint, and certainly less on the ecosystem? I mean, on the environment. Even these are very efficient types of systems and stacks that you can run, and you can cut down your operating power by half in a lot of different settings. It's just an example, and lots of people like Amazon, AWS, these people all experience this, and certainly Dell and AMD were part of all those different ecosystems. We've seen these tangible benefits right up front. So, but by shrinking that data center, it's just one example, but shrinking that data center, you can free up a lot of capital. We've had one of our customers free up $1 million a year in CapEx expense. So $1 million a year for, say, a health system, that makes a big difference to their operating budget, and makes room not only just to save the hospital money, but also invest and advance AI in their organization, because they need to do it. So it's not just about spending more money; it's about how can you become more efficient, so you free up capital to invest in AI projects. And Jake, you've heard a couple of these. So what are some of your thoughts there?
Absolutely. So recently, you and I attended a AMD Dell AI Summit, and one of the key pillars that they were talking about was normalizing and modernizing before scaling AI. Yeah. Too often we've seen organizations spend on AI pilots that stall because the fundamentals, the infrastructure, the clean data, the workflows, the operational alignment as a whole just weren't in place to scale.
Yep. No, excellent point. And so this is an opportunity to kind of do a reset and a reevaluation and make sure that you're implementing and deploying AI in a real operationally efficient manner and way. The other thing I want to bring up is leadership in the AI age. I created the piece, and Jake and I actually created the piece together several months ago on not only it's leading, but in this new age and having high emotional intelligence or high IQ and creating a psychologically safe community and environment for your innovators, for your teams. You're going to need this intellectual space and advancements to truly deploy AI in a very innovative way for your business. It's not about doing, again, the same thing. This goes back to the whole workflows and really innovating around what you do. It's about you evolving as a leader, how you lead in these environments, how you foster a culture of innovation. And again, going back to having a real strong EQ, emotional intelligence for you as a leader, but then also fostering those types of environments, allowing creativity. Failure is fine. Fail fast. We do. I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years. Failure is okay. You want to fail fast. You obviously want to fail safe. That's also the one thing that has come out a lot in the last couple of years is failing safe. But allow your teams to do that in a controlled environment. If you don't give them the space to fail and the opportunity to fail, you are going to fail in a bad environment. And in the day we work in hospitals and health systems and practices every day, we can't afford that. So we have to afford our teams to fail and stretch the limits and really test where they can go. And that's where a strong EQ as a leader comes into play and really truly fostering a culture of innovation. Unfortunately, I see a lot of people talk about it, but they don't do it. They don't evolve their leadership skills. This is critically important. So something I want to touch on again, we published a piece here several weeks ago on that. It's done pretty well. I've been now on a couple of radio shows myself discussing that topic specifically just because it's not just about putting AI into your engineering team and saying, all right, guys, figure it out. It's you leading them forward. You might have a great CTO or a great chief data officer or a great CIO, or chief innovation officer, all those, but you also, as the president, CEO, or leader of an organization, make sure that you're embracing those technologies, that type of leadership skills and those leadership styles. It makes a very large difference. Which then leads into our third principle around guardrails and governance. And I brought that up a little bit. And our good friend, John Halamka, as we brought up a couple of times, he used the example, a soup can without a label is useless unless it's validated and transparent. So buying an AI algorithm today is like buying a soup can without a label. You have no idea what's inside, which is very, very true. So you got to make sure that you kind of know what you're buying. You've looked at how it's relevant to you. There's a lot of promises out there, but really understand what you're trying to solve. And I'll dive into that a little bit more in a future discussion here, but you need governance, you need transparency, you need clinical validation. So these are really important points that will help you create the right AI model from the start. Again, we want to do this show today, and we probably will do a follow-on show because the way we're tracking in time. This is about starting or reinventing or restarting your AI journey, about getting the right data, the right strategy, the right leadership, having the right guardrails, having the right governance. If you have all that, you'll have the most optimized AI strategy for your organization. But before I go on, what are some of your thoughts there, Jake?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned guardrails and governance, and that kind of made me think of what you alluded to earlier, is the work that you're doing with Chai.
Yeah, no, great point. So I'm sure many of you, certainly if you're in the healthcare ecosystem, healthcare world, there's a new organization. This guy's been out there for now almost a year, called Chai, the Coalition for Health AI, and it's creating those guardrails for responsible use of AI and deployment within the industry, and certainly some oversight here in due time. But really important for people, if you are in healthcare and you're thinking about deploying AI, take a look at Chai, chai.org, chai.org. It'll give you a good basis, but really, they're advancing the responsible development, deployment, and oversight of AI in healthcare, and specifically fostering collaboration across the health sector, industry, government, academia, and patient communities, which is critically important. The fourth principle that we're going to get to, and hopefully we'll get through all five today, then we'll pile on five for another show. But the fourth principle is data strategy. And this is one that's kind of really come up to Jake and I over the last 6 months in a roaring way. First of all, know your data and know your sources. And Jake already brought up SLMs, so the small language models, the LLMs, the large language models. But it's really important to curate your data sources, the sites and sources that you know, that you trust, and that you know are validated, are peer reviewed. As many of us learned back, 30 years ago, and we're setting up our initial databases for the first time, garbage in, garbage out. So when we used to set up our contact databases or even our Salesforce implementation, stuff like that, you need to make sure you're putting clean data in there, because if you have bad info going in, bad info is going to come out of that system. So this is really going to be highlighted and spotlighted with AI. So you got to make sure that you know what sources your databases, your small language models or your large language models are pulling from. So for example, within our company specifically, we have a closed environment that we only pull in data that we know is curated from sources that we've all personally vetted, peer reviewed in most cases, well researched and validated, and we trust implicitly. Because then when we actually use our AI and run our queries, then we know what's coming out is trusted, is validated, and usually several times over. So that's really, really important. Don't just be pulling from the open internet, because this, as we all know, the internet is full of a lot of bad information and wrong information, and self-serving information in a lot of ways. So make sure that you're pulling from a closed ecosystem, and that you know exactly where your data is coming from. It'll save you down the road, because again, these language models are going to be used for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So that's one thing I've been really impressed with that Jake's been able to do, is create the best language model for us that is highly customized, extremely knowledgeable, and allows us to run 5 times faster than we were even 2 years ago. And it's quite impressive. So Jake, I want you to pick up a few words there for sure, because you've done a great job building this.
Yeah. So I think, like you said, it's really, you need to customize it for what you're doing. And so at Growth Performance, we're mostly in the healthcare sector. So that data has to be private. Whatever we're working with has to be private. And thankfully, since we're in the healthcare sector, there's a lot of guardrails around it. Most of our data is coming from government sources for the most part, or like you said, peer reviewed articles. And so thankfully, we're in a situation where a lot of the data is easy to be verified.
Excellent. And then also, I know one thing that we've talked about recently is, in our good friend John and Paul have mentioned a few times in this show recently, data must be usable without compromising privacy. And I know that's big. That's big to Mayo for sure, but it's big to all of us, or needs to be big to all of us. So again, data must be usable without compromising privacy. So, there's a blueprint for secure access, platform approach, and industrialized implementation in that regard. And I know you've done a little bit of work on that with Mayo. So talk about that, Jake.
Yeah. So to that point, the last episode that you did with Dr. John Halamka and Paul Cerrato, Paul explained how Mayo Clinic platform institutes this principle that they call the data behind glass. And essentially, it's just this federated system that developers can build and test algorithms with, even innovate on top of Mayo Clinic's data that they currently have. But the data itself never leaves Mayo's secure container. That way, you get the insights without compromising the patient privacy.
That's excellent. Thank you, Jake. So, and I'm going to leave to one more principle before we have to move on for this show, but we'll do a follow-up show, I promise. But the fifth principle, starting with AI. So pick one small measurable use case. And it could be example for in some clinics and health systems, ambient listening is a great one. Pathology pre-reads, patient translation tools, plan for success, anticipate the workflow, work out the best practices on the workflow before you deploy the AI, because again, AI is going to amplify whatever you do, and also role changes when it works. I mean, this will work over time, so you've got to figure out, what roles and change, what roles will change, or organizational changes need to happen when you start to scale. And if it breaks, prepare for that, and then knowing what you're going to do to fix that and to realign. So we're obviously, this is, again, AI is applicable to almost everything that we're doing, no matter what industry you're in. Certainly in healthcare, ambient listening is a big one we've been reading a lot about lately. Go small and start small. Don't try to boil the ocean. There's a great couple of analogies that we'll give to you on our next show that we learned around the industry in the last even couple of weeks. But again, start small, a measurable use case. It might take 3 months, 6 months. It might take longer. That's okay. You got to start somewhere. But again, keep that data tight, secure, and make sure curated sources, but then pick your use case and go. It's very important. Anything you want to say in closing argument there, Jake?
No, you just mentioned the ambient listening. And I think that's the most practical use, just because patients are actually feeling heard, when their doctor's looking at them rather than having their back turned on a computer and typing away. I think that's just a great way to start.
Yep. Excellent. Appreciate that. I know there's a great, our buddy Tony Noon's, the great quote there is, don't try to eat the whole Christmas dinner. Just start off with the ham sandwich. It's a great analogy. Start small, but start somewhere. I love that. So anyhow, Jake, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you to everyone listening on air. As always, we truly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. And a big thank you to all my listeners and supporters who voted us 2024 Podcast of the Year. We are so grateful. Tune into this show as a broadcast weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Justin T. Barnes, or track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor, and use the hashtag ThisJustinRadio so we can respond to your comments from the show. If you missed any of this episode or want to hear more, all of my shows are posted on Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Megaphone, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn. You can also check out some of the new content we just published on our thought leadership page at justinbarnes.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.